Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning, Kenyans. It's interesting you should start with me because I was in that petition that was dismissed yesterday. I was the lead lawyer. But let me say this. First, in the case of Busia, there's a slight misunderstanding. I see they say it was lapped with 12 million. There are three parties. The chair of the IBC and the IBC itself.
Yes.
Those are two parties.
Yes.
But in considering the cost, because they are represented by one lawyer, it will be considered as one, not necessarily as two. So essentially what you're looking at is 8 million, not 12 million. That's number one.
8 million.
Yes. Number two is that in the case of, for example, Governor Jamong, because of the nature of the case and the time it takes, I was leading a total of 5 lawyers. So even as you are looking at those costs, you should consider that those are 5 different lawyers from 5 different law firms.
Yes.
But number 3, the reason why the costs in election petitions appears a bit high is because of the nature and the time. We restricted election petitions in the last constitution, in the current constitution, that they must be finalized within 6 months. What that means is that any advocate who takes an election petition, first, you are restricted in numbers. And secondly, essentially, you are spending almost all your time in that petition. Now, the compensation for spending virtually all your time in one case must be reasonable. And if, therefore, you look at that kind of amount with those number of lawyers against that time, then you find it's actually quite modest. What people don't know is that the reason judges put a ceiling, as in the case of Busia, that a maximum of so much, if they didn't, by the way, the cost would be much higher. If the lawyers were allowed a free hand to indicate the kind of amount of time they spend, the money they spend in flying up and down, driving up and down, and the number of lawyers, the cost would be much, much higher. So the judges put a cap so as to restrict the cost, not so as to make it higher. If, for example, in the case of Busia, they did not put that against that number of lawyers and the time, the cost would be much higher. The cost of litigation in all other matters is much, much higher than in election petitions. So I don't think it's way out of line. I think it's quite reasonable.
Quite reasonable.